content warning ahead. In this episode, I'm giving a recap of our Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game, and there is some adult content that some people might find offensive, so please be forewarned. I played with these guys for a long time, so I have their consent, and they would tell me if they found something inappropriate or uncomfortable. So I think I've actually been playing, I calculated, with one of them for about 20 years. So there you go. Content warning, adult content ahead. But only in the recap, not from the call-in by Barry from the GM Shadow.
Hi Carl, it's Barry here. I'll shadow the GM for you, just leaving you a few messages. First of all, say loving the new show. Good to hear you on here with your own instead of having to, waste your time on that loser Jason show. No offense, Jason. I'm sure you understand. Yeah, loving hearing about Savage Worlds as well. I mean, I'm always looking for a good generic system to use, and I'm really kind of loving GURPS at the moment, and I have always been tempted by Savage Worlds, but I don't know, something about it just kind of doesn't quite fit with me. But I would like to try it a few more times at some point in the future. Jason does keep trying to poach me into some of your games, but they always clash with things like, spending time with family and taking my daughter to ride her pony so we can pretend to be posh and all that kind of stuff. But maybe one day I'll try and get there at some point in time. Bit sad that I didn't manage to get a chance to ring in earlier and sort of maybe answer some of those things around those musical quizzes. I mean, there's only one that I actually knew, but, mostly I was too late because I was falling well behind with podcasts. I mean, please keep up with the musical bits because I would like to try and guess whenever I ever work out some of the other ones. I'm afraid I'm not so great at some of them. And the main thing to say is keep on going and be good. And if you can't be good, be awesome, because at the end of the day, only the good die young. And for those less musically inclined out there, that was obviously a sample of Enter Sandman by Death Clock. Jason, you should know that one.
Hey Barry, thanks for the call-ins, and I definitely was on the fence about Savage Worlds until I played it a few times, or at least the new Adventure Edition a few times with some of the designers. And I think Jason Connerly has said that it plays better than it reads. I think it seems cumbersome and it seems like it might not work with using cards and dice, this whole different dice for increasing your skills and attributes, and exploding dice. What does that mean? But then on paper, it runs pretty, in practice, it runs pretty smoothly, and that's what I've really enjoyed about it. And I've used it for not just Deadlands, and I haven't just played it in Savage Pathfinder, but I ran like a mini campaign using, or called Ultima Forsan, which is zombie apocalypse in the Renaissance era. And my wife and another friend of mine played, and they really enjoyed it. And of course, they always enjoyed the action cards. Although my wife shared what she enjoyed, what she really didn't like was constantly getting low cards on the initiative for the action cards, which she harangued me for early on in that session. So I'm going to continue to run and play Savage Worlds. I'm actually invested in not just Deadlands, but Savage Pathfinder and East Texas University. And I'm doing another Kickstarter for a system or a game world called the Four Horsemen, which it seems like it's military sci-fi mechs and mercenary groups. And I've talked about the After, which I really want to get to the table. So, and now with the new Rifts Atlantis Kickstarter coming out soon, maybe I'll have to go back and get the Rift stuff. I have Palladium Rift stuff, and I've heard, and I always love the cover art, love the concept, but I've heard that the game system is cumbersome, so you'd have to use like Savage Worlds or GURPS or some other generic system to make it more palatable and playable. So, and speaking of GURPS, I would like to give that another chance at some point. I was commenting on someone's podcast, maybe it was Shays Webster's podcast, that I believe that GURPS would be great for historically minded games, just like Hero System, the one that I use the most, 5th edition revised, really worked. Well, not champions level, but heroic level hero system worked really well for a historical type game, and I ran like a Wild West called High Plains Heroes for a while, and I also ran sort of a something I called Musket and Saber, which was set during the early 18th century, circa 1712, 1713 or so, about the start of the golden age of piracy. And it kind of had a feel of I would say, in a way, it had like a feel of the Neil Stephenson's Baroque cycle, in that there were tales happening in different locations. I think I had someone who was playing a Portuguese navigator. I had someone who was playing a frontiersman. I had someone who was playing an artist. And they were in different locales, like basically present day Canada and the wilderness, the coast of present day Florida for the navigator, and the artist started in Boston and did some adventures with some of the Native American nations out in that area, and in upstate New York. And actually, I think the frontiersman and the artist did meet. At one point, I also had another player who didn't play very long because of scheduling, that was playing, and this was all done play by post, by the way. So that's why it was easier to have like different locales in different areas. It would be hard to pull that off in a live game, really. But play by post is much easier to do. And I did have one player who started out as what was it? Oh, one player started out as an older woman who was very good at herbalism and healing. Oh, I guess it would be a midwife, and was being accused of witchcraft. And I think I was going to start this person near Boston as well, so they would have interacted with the artist very quickly, but that didn't pan out. But the other groups were pretty interesting, and I liked a historical setting, historical backdrop. Actually, someone was commenting last night after our Warhammer Fantasy game. We went to a pub and had a beer or two to discuss the game, and you can hear the shark in the background probably. And he mentioned the Roman Cthulhu Invictus game that I ran with the backdrop of the Teutoburg Forest conflict in '89, and he said it was worked really well. So I guess I might be okay at putting a historical backdrop on a fictitious RPG type event. And again, I mean, I believe that a game like GURPS or low level hero system or even Call of Cthulhu works really well, because I think it's Call of Cthulhu stuff is grounded in reality, and there's weird on the fringes, and you play like a normal person. And maybe that's what it is. It's like if you play a normal person in the backdrop of a historical context, it works really well. And thanks again for the call-ins. I definitely plan to have more songs, and I think I will add a song tidbit to this one. I know your little quote is only the actually, what is your quote? Only the Good Die Young by Iron Maiden, off of the Seventh Son of a Seventh Son album, and it's only the good die young, and the evil seems to live forever. That's the continuation of that 2-line couplet. So I'll give you another one in this next podcast somewhere that you can try to guess on. I just don't have like a current earworm and to sing about, or if I do, it's the chorus, and the chorus sometimes gives the song away, which is not as fun. But thanks for the call-ins. I'm sorry you didn't get to guess some, but maybe you can get a Benny before the 20th of July. Okay, Barry, this one is at your request. Again, the contest is song, title, and artist. If you can guess the album, that'll be a bonus of some sort. So here we go. Let me tell you about my life. Let me tell you about my dreams. Let me tell you about the things that happen, always real to me. Let me tell you of my hope, of my need to reach the sky. Let me take you on an awkward journey. Let me tell you why. And yes, it was and is an awkward journey in our Warhammer Fantasy role-playing game. I want to say that this session might have been up there in one of the best sessions ever. It's our second meeting of the Enemy Within campaign, Enemy in the Shadows. And these players are awesome. We were down one player, but he kind of gave me a heads up on what his character would do, which is great. So the scene opens when they had just finished off fighting some mutants as they are on a carriage ride between where they started in Middenheim, traveling south towards the capital city of Altorf. So they're cleaning. Last time they started cleaning up the scene, and one of the players saw someone that looked just like him. It could have been his twin, some sort of doppelganger, and he found some documents on this person that indicated that he was. I would also preface this before I say this. There are spoilers in this recap of the Enemy Within campaign. There's also some adult content. So if that bothers you, or if adult type themes or occurrences of violence bother you, well, I give you fair warning. You can stop now, and that won't happen. It is Warhammer Fantasy role-playing, which is grim and dark. There's gallows humor that abounds. There are adult situations that occur. It is not a candy-coated four-color world. And I feel like the players embrace that, which I think is part of the fun. They get the verse. They're all long studies in the old world of that Games Workshop put out, both playing Warhammer Fantasy Battle and Warhammer 40K and Age of Sigmar, the newest rendition of sort of fantasy tabletop miniature roleplay. So they know the lore, they get the verse, and I think that really helps. So where we pick up, they find this doppelganger. There's documentations on him that indicate that he is the heir to a manor, lots of money. There's an affidavit signed that this person is that person by members of the clergy and high station people in the city of Nuln. So it's like a notary that this is the person we're talking about. I mean, there's no right in the world, there's no internet, there's no really pictures, a file of pictures of people. So you have to take someone's word, and people who are higher up are willing to have services, just like a notary today. And you would have to get two witnesses to sign that you are, as an affidavit, that you are who you say you are. So this doppelganger has those documents. This doppelganger is dead. And the player, in great Warhammer Fantasy tradition, takes those items and decides to become that person. I mean, and I think a lot of this is driven by the way that class society is structured, being that the amount of money you get from being a noble to being even like an upper middle class person, like this character is a lawyer by trade, is phenomenal. So, I mean, it's like shillings to gold crowns. It's basically, if you get a few shillings for your profession, and then as a noble, gold crowns are falling from the sky. It's such a temptation. So the character took it, and I felt that this character would, and play it really well. So while they were examining the situation, they hear horses coming, and it's a patrol of road wardens. I will say that this is this adventure is definitely has a lot of events, so it's not so much a point plot or how does it call it? It's not so much a point crawl, but it's definitely an event crawl, and things happen, and the characters are somewhat bystanders, and that would be one of my maybe criticisms of it. It is pretty. This is what happens, and how do your characters react? I don't know. It's good and bad. I don't feel like the characters feel like they don't have a say, but that is definitely a criticism here early on, and maybe that's just to get the plot rolling. And once the plot gets going, it's like wherever the characters decide to go. And I've noticed that scanning through the adventure, that when they get to the cities, um, or to the certain cities, it becomes like a city sandbox. So, so anyway, the road wardens are coming. So the player basically, one of the players decides, hey, let's just turn the body over. Oh, and this player told the had his character tell the other player character, so they all know, and they're like, well, yeah, let's do it. So why not become nobles with a 20,000 crown inheritance? So they turn the body of the doppelganger over and drag it into the road, to deface it somewhat and throw it in with the other mutants. So when the road wardens come and ask questions, they go, "Oh, mutants, we got to burn them," as is the law. And the road wardens, they convince the road wardens, and they agree, and they basically burn the mutant bodies and the body of the doppelganger, who I guess they convinced the road warden sergeant that that was the leader of the mutants as well, so they wouldn't ask further questions. So then they collected the horses, split up the horses between the two carriages, helped right the carriage, and then they went on to the next place. Fortunately, there was a doctor there, so the antics that happened the last time, where characters got thrown off the coach and got injured, or were injured by the mutants they fought, were able to get patched up. So they used some of their treasure earnings to buy some healing draughts. Um, and But it was generally uneventful at the second inn they went to, and then they took their leave of they decided to stay with the coach that they had gotten there on, although the noble folk, they took off in sort of the big company coach, as opposed to the small company coach that the players were in. So the coachman appreciated that. Didn't charge him for this extra leg. It had been exorbitant the time before. So, I mean, that's another comment I should add here, is that I think the players really interact with the NPCs enough to start to engender and cultivate these relationships with the NPCs. So halts and grunts are notables, and maybe they'll come back. So it's uneventful. The trip to the big city of Altorf. I think the Warhammer Fantasy does a great job of describing the feel, and you get the feel of the old world and the big city. They had heard from the doctor that things were strange in Altorf. People were tense, and then the two magic sensing elf characters could tell something was off with the winds of magic in the city. They didn't quite know what. There are lots of bawds and hawkers trying to get them to go to this inn or the other when they leave the coach. A thief tries to steal an item from one of the players. They chase him down. Then this is all before this. They were interrupted by a procession of the emperor, which was noted as the fourth time this week, which seemed very strange. Someone tries to give some sort of secret sign to the player. I'll call him the heir, the inheritor. So someone was trying to give some sort of secret sign to the inheritor, but the inheritor just sort of mimicked it and didn't reply back. So then these people don't know what to do. They're confused. They look around. They see someone, and they run towards that person, who is like a burly fellow in the shadows. And then that person closes the door. What was good is that the magic using character, so one of the characters is a wizard, which makes things interesting because, again, the game and the world is not quite balanced. Yes, there are consequences for casting magic if you screw up or mess up, but magic can be pretty powerful. So the wizard cast a spell called eavesdropping, and he was able to hear what was going on. Basically, he heard that whoever this person was that called those fellows over basically offed them. But they tried to find in the alleyways and byways what had happened because he heard them get killed, basically. But they couldn't find any bodies or anything or any evidence of such nefarious deed. But then the character who was a villager ran into a person who who he had styled as an uncle. So he was a friend of his father's who had fought in the war, and knew the character, the player character, when the player character was a young lad. Saw that he had grown up and gone to the big city. So, basically said, "Oh, it's great to see you. Let's go to my favorite bar." And told him some other strange rumors about the city. Offered him a job on his boat to get to the next place when they got to the bar. And actually, this was very interesting to the elf who's trying to find his horse, because there was a menagerie as part of this festival that they were going to in the town of Boghafen. They ran into a street preacher who said all these prophecies that seemed odd and obscure. The street preacher then had some sort of seizure or fit, and the Wood Elf Knight went to go take care of them. He has some medical skill, but then sort of played off the fit as part of his charlatanry. So who knows if the prophecy was true or not? And the player, I thought, got that and played along and said, "Okay, well, here's a penny for you, prophet man." So like a penny for the Witcher. So they get to the inn, and this is where the best game ever occurred. This strange person, all dressed in black, comes into the place, and the characters kind of check him out, ignore him. They're trying to set up, the next leg of the journey. The uncle of the character, he offers them jobs on the boat, and actually what was also very interesting in the game itself is that so you can advance your career, and it costs XP, but because this was happening within the story, the authors wrote in that this is a one time where you can basically switch careers or advance to like a boatman career for free. So one of the players took it. The villager player, who was the quote unquote nephew of this NPC, decided to take that offer and go from a villager to a boatman. And it actually works out because they have very similar ways of advancement. So probably within a session or two, they can advance to the next career in boatman, even though they were going to advance to the next career in villager maybe this time around. So it wasn't that huge of an investment to get a free career switch. He liked the flavor. This player loves to get into the world and role play, so it totally worked for him. I think I picked again correctly which player to make the relation or friend of this NPC. So I'm batting 1,000 here, 2 for 2. So we'll see what happens next. Oh, another weird thing happened in the city, coupled with that strange goings on in magic. One of the players saw a dog barking at a blank wall, tried to see what it was barking at, and failed their magic roll. So something happened. Basically, one of his eyes changed color, and it was kind of weird. So there you go. So now he has a turquoise eye and an amethyst-colored eye. This is the elf wizard. So back at the bar, the man in black, looking all tough, scaring the patrons, comes in. Shortly thereafter, a couple nobles who are slumming come in with their entourage of big burly bodyguards, and they start making fun of the commoners, making fun of the players who are mostly commoners, except for the two. Well, the elves are sort of out of society, so they make fun of them too. But then the players know, like I said, they get the world, and even their NPC Yosef, who was there with them, the person who hired them for the boat, is cautioning them, don't mess with these guys. We don't want to get in any trouble. But trouble has a way of rearing itself in the grim dark world of Warhammer. So the nobles decided to up the ante and started playing this game where they would take a swig of brandy or drink a cup of brandy and then spit it out onto the commoners that they showed disdain for. And it so happened to land on the players, and one of the players took it, kind of looked around, drank his beer, and then spit back. And that sort of escalated things, or started to escalate things. And as it turns out, that man in black was something called a protagonist, who's a hired thug for the entertainment of these nobles, so like a hired fighter or mercenary. So he steps up, challenges the player who did this to the nobleman. The noblemen are pretty pissed off that a commoner would dare do this, so he must be punished. The duel ensues. This guy is this NPC man in black way outclasses the person who is fighting him, disarms him, smacks him on the head with the pommel of his sword, and this is where I think the savvy players, or the players, I think are really good, and I'm very happy for these players. There's meta currencies in Warhammer Fantasy. There's a fortune and fate and resilience, and resilience is coupled with another meta currency. One meta currency is, and the meta currencies you can either spend them permanently or not. Fate and fortune, and then resilience, and the other thing, it starts with an R2. Resolve and resilience, that's what it is. So you can spend, one of them is you regain at the end of every session. One of them you can spend permanently for more, if there are more devastating effects. And one is more for physical things, one is more for mental things. So resilience for mental, resilience, resolve for mental, fate, fortune for physical. So the character used one of his resilience or temporary resilience resolves to not get stunned from the blow to the head. So the noble, and I don't know, I felt this was a logical escalation. The players, I felt, knew where this was going after the one player had escalated it. So one of the noblemen then decides to punish further the player who's down on the ground, having pretended to be stunned, and he basically is about to urinate on him. So the player, instead of taking it, says, there's no way I'm going to let myself be degraded like that. And I don't know. I guess you all can comment if you get this far on whether or not that was appropriate. I mean, the players were fine with it. We played for a long time, so I feel like we know our limits. Anyway, this player's character retaliated, whipped out his dagger. No one, and I made the rolls. No one saw it. Even this really good duelist who did see it tried to block it and didn't block it. So basically, the player slashed at the groin of the nobleman and rolled really well, and the nobleman tried to dodge and rolled really bad. So it ended up being a lot of damage to the nether regions, and things were cut off. And the nobleman screamed, fell to the ground, bleeding out. Everyone is like stunned that this had happened. And the characters then, for the second time in 2 days, decided to flee. And they fled to the boat. They all got out. There were some Keystone Cop moments as one player dove out the window, other players followed. When the bodyguards tried to follow, they ran into each other. These are all rolls on the table out in the open. So it's really great when the rule of cool holds true and the dice support the rule of cool. So it was crazy. The player who committed the foul deed, he realizes that they've now made enemies in Altorf of probably a couple noble houses. They get out, they get to the boat. There's some other things that happen, but I'll save that for next time because it's I don't want to ruin the, I guess, the fantastic thing that happened in that session. And I know this has been like, oh my gosh, almost 20 minutes of a recap, but well worth it. One of the best sessions ever. All the players got away. They got to the boat. They push off, heading down the river to their next stop. And we'll see what happens in 2 weeks. I really would like to try to interview some of these players. It would be really fun. We might need a censor bleep or two. But hey, that's Warhammer Fantasy at its finest. And one of the players did say, I love this game. So for my outro, I'm going to try to explain, because I don't think I did it in the 20 minutes of the recap, why I felt this session was one of the best sessions ever. It might be inferred by some of the things I said, but just to state it out flatly. So everything went really well, even though a player was absent. They were able to give me sort of ideas of what they would do, and that it didn't feel like, yes, this player was missed, but it didn't feel like the character disappeared and then reappeared. The character was involved, and things went very smoothly. Everyone was engaged and paid attention. They paid attention to the little clues and hints that were dropped along the way, because there is like an overall plot and theme in this campaign, and I like that players get it. They get the old world. They love like the small things like the procession, the attempted pickpocket, and meeting an old acquaintance, and then the, I guess, hilarity that ensued from the somewhat, in some circles, inappropriate events that the players loved and got a kick out of, just made it such an enjoyable adventure and session. And like I said, one of the players exclaimed, "This is why I love this game." And we have like a new guy who's only been with our home group for about a year, and playing online only, and he's like, this game is so good and I love this group. And I think what's really neat too, on top of it being the best game ever, then we want to like debrief next door at the pub and have a beer or two and discuss the events. And I think that makes it even more memorable, because it makes it really more not just a game, but like a social experience. And I think that's part of it. That's what makes it one of the best sessions ever.
Exit light, enter night. Take my hand. We're off to Never Never Land. Yeah.
So that's it for this session. I wanted to make it a shorter session and highlight the Warhammer Fantasy roleplay session, and give a new caller his due, it being the only person for a call-in. And thank you again, then, Barry of GM Shadow, for your contribution to this podcast and your insight, and for encouraging me to keep on singing.